Are you thinking of starting this huge reading adventure? Then I have some things you really need to know before you start digging into it. Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Maria and I read a lot. Today we're going to talk about the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson, and we're going to deep dive into it so you are prepared for everything you need to know before you start reading it, because it is a fantastic adventure, but there are also some things you really should consider before you start. So, the Stormlight Archive is a series of 5 books by Brandon Sanderson, and like you see, they are quite chunky. And this is a very complex but also so good, interesting fantasy story, and you also follow multiple characters' point of view during the whole series. The books takes place on a planet called Roshar, where mysterious things are happening and magic is awakening. In the first book, The Way of Kings, you get to follow the soldier Kaladin, who is fighting for his life in different army settings. You get to follow the scholar Shallan, who is seeking big opportunities in a country far, far away and trying to rebrand the name of her family. And you also get to follow Dalinar, the general, who is getting less and less popular due to some weird visions he's having. And like I said, magic and mysterious things are happening in the world, and as the story progresses, they get to discover that the world is far more dangerous, complex, and also mysterious than they imagined. If you are completely new to Brandon Sanderson books, then you should know that these aren't the first book he has written. He is publishing a lot of fantasy novels in his universe, the Cosmere, so there are a lot of different books you could read before this. Many recommend that you start with the Mistborn series. This is one of my big time favorite books ever. It's a series of 3 books. You get a really good understanding for how Brandon Sanderson writes and how his universe kind of works, even though it's a bit different from the Stormlight Archive. So if you haven't read anything from him, I recommend that maybe you shouldn't start with this and start with this instead. But that's also completely up to you, because you can read the Stormlight Archive first if you want to. And this is a big time commitment. Like I said, the books are very long, but if you enjoy them, it's totally worth it. It took me months to read, and since I read them on my tablet, I didn't really realize how thick they were before I saw them at the bookstore when I was buying them for my shelf. So that's why my TBR is super long, because I have spent my time with these characters. But since there are so many good characters and the story is so interesting, I think it's totally worth it. But you should know that this will probably eat up a lot of your time and also your reading time for quite a while. The first book in the series, The Way of Kings, has the best start on a book I've probably ever read, because you immediately want to know what it's about and what happens next. Seth, Sanson Valno, truthless of Shinwar, wore white on the day he was to kill a king. And then the story just takes off from there. But I should say that I thought this book was kind of hard to get into, and also the whole world. The story starts with a lot of military and soldier stuff, and there are a lot of focus on Seth, who kills the king, and also a lot of focus on the male characters. So I personally thought it was a bit of much testosterone, and I thought maybe this book isn't for me if it's going to be all about that. But I kept on reading, and I'm so glad I did, because even if the start is a bit hard to get through, because there's so much information, and like I said, it was so heavily focused on like war and the male characters, I think it gets so much better as soon as you get into it. The world on Roshar is a bit complex as well. It was hard for me before I got used to it to imagine all the things. For example, the nature is reacting to people in it, and the beasts are completely different from our types of animals here. So it takes some bit of processing, and you need to keep on reading to really get into the story, but when you do, it's absolutely amazing. One of the things I love about these books as well is the magic system. It's really fun and interesting to read. It's also a bit complex, but as soon as you get into it, you really enjoy it. And also how the characters find their magical powers and how they develop through them. As I've understood it, Brandon Sanderson usually includes some godlike themes in his book, and in this series it's there as well. I thought that also was a really interesting part, and I really enjoyed how it played out during these books. There are some love stories during this series, and I think it adds to the story, but there are more like subplots in these books, and I actually enjoy it because the books focuses on so many other things. So if you are more a romantasy reader, maybe you shouldn't expect stuff like that from these books, but I still, like I said, love the world, love the character and the story. I've also understood that Brandon Sanderson has gotten some critique for his writing about love, and I could agree a little bit with that, because at some part, I think between some of the books, there was a relationship that would have been interesting to read about that was just glossed over. It had ended before you even got to know about it. Since you're so invested in these characters and really want them to be happy, I would have wanted to know more about that. Since this series is so long, the story is a bit slower at times, and some periods I really had to focus to keep on reading. And then there are some parts that are really, really intense and you really can't put the books down. So if you're going into this, maybe you should know that the pacing is, of course, a bit slow at times and more intense at other times. Since I read them on my reading tablet, it's a bit of a blur to me. I don't really know where one book starts and where the other one ends, but I enjoyed the beginning a lot, and then I thought the middle part was a bit slower, even though I had heard so many say that the third book is their favorite, and then I thought it really picked up speed at the end. So I think the first two books and the last one are my personal favorites, but like I said, it's really hard to distinguish when you have read them on a tablet. You should also know that this is the first arc of 2, and the second one is planned to be released in 2031, so it's a long time until you can read the other 5 books. But you could absolutely read these 5 books as a standalone series, so I don't think you should let that stop you if you are interested. It really is an amazing series with so many good characters and such an interesting magic system and so many interesting themes. And when I don't have a huge TBR or something else to read, I will probably read them again sometime, because I just loved spending time in this universe. And if you want to read something else but something similar, I think you should check this book out.